I am Alara Vance. I am 72 years old, and the date in the small, brass case calendar on my nightstand reads February 11th. For the last 2 decades, February has been a cruel month in Providence, Rhode Island, marked by a damp, bone-aching chill that settles deep in the mortar of my old clapboard house. But until 3 days ago, I genuinely believed the worst thing I'd face was merely the maintenance of his cold, an endless cycle of shoveling salt and feeding the oil burner. My house is a small, 2-story structure, faded blue, settled deep into a neighborhood where the ancient maples lining the street are older than any resident. The air here always carries a faint, persistent scent, a mix of salt from the distant ocean, wet pine needles, and the faint, sweet decay of old leaves pressed into the asphalt. It used to be a comforting smell, the smell of permanence. Now, it was just the scent of my isolation. My husband, Arthur, died 7 years ago. The silence he left behind wasn't empty, it was a crushing weight. He left me the house, his modest pension, and the crippling habit of waiting for his heavy, reliable footsteps on the porch. 4 years, I navigated that quiet, learning to find peace in the tick of the grandfather clock and the rustle of my own slow movements. But for the last 3 years, that fragile quiet had been systematically, brutally shattered by my grandson Liam. Liam, 19, was the last, most precious piece of my daughter, Cecilia. When Cecilia died, suddenly from an aneurysm, gone in the blink of a summer afternoon, I didn't hesitate. I threw myself into the role of caregiver, desperate to honor her memory, desperate to love something that felt like her. But the boy who arrived was not the tender-hearted, goofy child I remembered. He was a monolith of unprocessed grief, a monument built of pure, molten rage. He was beautiful in the harsh, angular way of youth, but his eyes were ancient with resentment. His abuse was insidious, a slow, systematic erosion of my comfort that was far more damaging than a single violent act. It was psychological warfare waged with apathy and noise. It started with the sound, the perpetual, aggressive slam of his bedroom door, a sound that didn't just rattle the glass of the framed photos on the mantelpiece, but rattle the very composure I fought so hard to maintain. It was the TV in his room, not just loud, but blaring, rap music vibrating through the floorboards at 3 a.m, a deliberate, sonic invasion designed to remind me that my rest, my peace, was entirely subservient to his whim. Then came the contempt, the way he would leave a bowl of stale cereal on the dining table for days, a small, passive-aggressive monument to my supposed servitude. The way he would demand money for supplies, money I knew went to fast food and cheap video games, with a condescending sneer that implied my entire existence was merely a source of funds. His demands were constant, and my obedience, fueled by guilt and fear, became increasingly fragile. I was an old woman, shrinking herself to fit into the increasingly small, dangerous corners of her own home. The deepest wound, however, was his utter disregard for the sentimental economy of my life. He had no respect for history, no reverence for what was precious. One day, I found him standing over the blue porcelain elephant figurine. Arthur's mother had given it to us on our wedding day, a ridiculously ornate, delicate piece, a symbol of longevity and fidelity. Liam, furious because the Wi-Fi was slow, hadn't even looked at it. He'd simply swept his arm across the sideboard, sending the elephant crashing to the floor. The sound was a sharp, final crack that echoed the sound of my composure breaking. He just walked away, leaving me on my knees, silently collecting the shards, the jagged pieces sharp against my fingertips. I didn't scold him. I couldn't. I just stored the pieces in a box, an archive of his destruction. All of this, the noise, the contempt, the shattered sentiment, was merely the preparation for the main act. The main act occurred last Thursday. Around 2 a.m, I was downstairs in the kitchen, gripped by a familiar anxiety that always settled when Liam was out late. I was staring out at the driving snow, a whiteout that reduced the porch light to a dismal, haloed glow. I clutched a mug of herbal tea, the steam doing little to warm my palms. I was waiting, a professional waiter, practiced in the subtle art of enduring. Then I heard it, the key scraping violently against the lock of the front door, followed by a sudden, aggressive yank that almost ripped the mechanism from the frame. He wasn't sneaking in. He was stomping out. Liam strode into the kitchen, wearing a threadbare parka, and carrying a slung gym bag that looked too heavy. His face, caught in the stark fluorescent lighting, was a mask of cold, predatory fury. He hadn't slept, and the tension around his mouth was a warning sign I had learned to respect. "Where are you going, Liam?" "It's 2 a.m, and the weather's terrible," I asked, my voice a whisper, hoping to soothe the beast. He didn't afford me the dignity of a reply. He walked straight past me, his presence pulling a draft of cold air in his wake. He went to the hall table where I kept the ceramic bowl of spare keys, a bowl, ironically, that held a sign inscribed with "Home is where the key is." He plunged his hand in and grabbed my set, the keys to the blue 2008 Ford Focus. My Focus. It wasn't a valuable car, but it was invaluable to me. Arthur bought it for me on my 65th birthday, a sturdy, practical machine that represented my complete freedom. It was my link to the outside, my escape route, my access to the pharmacy, the library, the gravesite. "Liam, no!" I cried, louder this time. The word was a desperate plea. "You can't drive. You don't have a license, and it's a whiteout. You'll kill yourself." He paused, still not looking at me. He just glared at the dangling keys, then back at the door, consumed by a selfishness so vast it blocked out the rest of the world. I rushed forward, planting my small, frail body between him and the exit. My heart was pounding a frantic, trapped rhythm against my ribs. "Please, Liam, that's my only car. It's too dangerous. I need it for my appointments. I needed to get the medicine." That, the mention of my needs, was the trigger. The contempt I had grown used to hardened into something lethal. He raised his head, and I saw the pure, vicious hatred in his eyes. A hatred not for me, but for the life he felt tethered to. "Your appointments!" he spat, his voice low and guttural, dripping with contempt. "You think your little trips to the pharmacy matter to anyone? My life is stagnant here, Grandma. I need out of this dead-end town. You and your stupid, slow rules are suffocating me." He used his bulk as a weapon. He didn't lift his hand to strike, but simply flexed his shoulder and drove his body into mine. It was a violent, brutal jolt that sent me stumbling backward, a rag doll tossed by a frustrated child. I lost my footing and crashed into the heavy mahogany hutch behind me. The breath whooshed out of my lungs in a strangled gasp. My left elbow struck the sharp edge of the hutch's glass door, and I heard a sickening thunk. A searing wave of pain shot up my arm. I cried out, a single, sharp sound of shock that was more animalistic than human. He didn't look back. He didn't check if I was breathing. He just walked out, the keys jingling a victorious, careless sound. The front door slammed, so hard the remaining glass pane in the storm door fractured, leaving a jagged spiderweb scar. A moment later, the Focus engine roared to life. The sound was wrong, too loud, too aggressive. The tires spun, spitting gravel and snow as he tore out of the driveway, the sound echoing through the cold night like a tear in the fabric of my sanity. I lay on the cold hardwood floor, the mug of herbal tea cooling beside me, the steam dissolving into the frigid air. I was immobilized, staring up at the ceiling where the porch light beam trembled. He hadn't just stolen the car, he had stolen my last shred of self-respect. He had taken the one thing that represented my ability to leave, and he had done it with the utmost cruelty. Slowly, painfully, I pulled myself up, using the side of the hutch. The pain in my elbow was already turning into a hot, throbbing ache. A terrible, crystalline premonition settled over me. The car was gone, and he would come back triumphant, expecting applause for his recklessness. I didn't go to bed. I couldn't. I sat in Arthur's old, worn armchair in the living room, wrapped in a threadbare quilt, listening to the relentless howl of the wind. I was the silent sentinel of my own destruction. At 4:45 a.m., the landline, an archaic, beige instrument I hadn't moved since 1985, rang. The sound was shocking in the heavy silence. I picked it up on the second ring. "Mrs. Vance," a tired, official voice asked. "This is the state police. We found your vehicle on Route 1. It appears to have struck a guardrail near the overpass. The vehicle is a total loss." I closed my eyes, a single, hot tear tracing a path down my cheek. The total loss of the car was, I realized, the total loss of my old, passive self. Was anyone hurt? I whispered, the maternal instinct still fighting the icy reality. The driver, your grandson Liam, was unharmed. He walked away from the vehicle. He wasn't charged with anything at the scene. No sign of intoxication, just reckless driving and panic. We've released him with a stern warning. He stated he took the vehicle without permission. You will need to file the appropriate paperwork at the precinct if you intend to pursue charges for the theft. We recommend you do so, Mrs. Vance. The line went dead. The silence returned, filled now with the chilling certainty of ruin and the faint, unmistakable sounds of heavy footsteps on the stairs. He was home. He was sleeping, expecting me to clean up his mess. I walked upstairs, past his closed bedroom door, a door that now felt like a barricade. I went into my bathroom and looked at the angry purple bruise already forming on my elbow, the trembling of my small, arthritic hands. In that moment, standing under the weak, unforgiving morning light, the decision was forged in ice and steel. No more cleaning. No more silence. My infinite, desperate love had become his impenetrable shield, and now that shield would be repurposed. It would be his consequence. I went back downstairs, not to cry, but to prepare. I put on a kettle for coffee, not for my own comfort, but for the company I planned to keep. I needed to call my strength back, and that strength lay outside these four walls. I moved with a cold, surgical calm that belied the roaring tempest inside me. This wasn't anger. Anger was hot and messy. This was resolve, a crystalline force born from years of suppressed terror and pain. My goal was to transform the dining room, the heart of our domestic life, into a courtroom, a place where the invisible wreckage of the last 3 years would finally be made visible before the hammer of the law fell. My first act of preparation was the most symbolic. I retrieved the old shoe box from the hall closet, the one I had used to store the pieces of the blue porcelain elephant figurine. Arthur's mother, a woman of fierce southern propriety, had gifted it to us, emphasizing its symbolism, a trunk-up representing prosperity and longevity. Now, it was a box of useless, beautiful fragments. I carried the box into the dining room. I didn't hide them. I took the jagged shards and deliberately arranged them on the antique oak sideboard where the elephant had always stood, a gruesome exhibit of what 3 years of rage had cost me. I wanted the cold, sharp evidence of his general wreckage to be the first thing he saw. He would see that his destruction was not isolated, but accumulated. Next, the breakfast. I wasn't making something simple. I made the single most effortful meal I could, scalloped potatoes baked with Gruyere and chives. It was Liam's childhood favorite, a meal that took precision, time, and care. I sliced the potatoes meticulously thin, layered them with cream and cheese, each layer a brick in the wall of my new resolve. The preparation was a form of meditation, a ritual of control against the chaos of the night. As the casserole baked, filling the house with a deceptive warmth, a thick, buttery, homey smell, I felt the irony like a blade. I was serving a feast before the execution. While the house filled with the aroma of betrayal, I began the calls. I sat at the small, cluttered desk in the living room, consulting my Rolodex, a relic of a bygone era. The first call was the most critical. "Hello, Empy. It's Alara. I apologize for calling so early, but I need you. I need the Iron Lady." Beatrice Sterling was Arthur's cousin, a woman 10 years my junior who had clawed her way to the top of the New England legal world, a senior partner in one of the biggest firms downtown. She was known for her complete lack of sentimentality and her chilling, clinical efficiency. BA's voice, initially groggy, immediately sharpened, detecting the granite beneath my words. "Alara, what in God's name happened? Your voice sounds like you just filed a notice of execution." I told her everything, leaving out no detail. The push, the thud against the hutch, the stolen keys, the 4:45 a.m. call confirming the total loss. I was precise, clinical, refusing to use emotional language. "Did you contact the precinct?" she asked, cutting through my narrative to the legal imperative. "I was told I must file the paperwork to pursue the felony charge of unauthorized use of a vehicle in grand theft," I replied, the legal terms tasting like ash in my mouth. "That's exactly what you're doing," bestated the statement non-negotiable. "But don't you dare go to the station alone, Alara. I'll come to the house. We'll drive together." "No," I said, my grip tightening on the receiver until my knuckles were white. "I need you here at 7:30 a.m. For breakfast. I need a witness, B. I need Liam to see that this isn't just an old woman's sorrow, this is the law sitting at my table. I need him to know that the community has closed ranks around me. B fell silent for a long moment. She was a woman who understood drama, especially when it was wielded for legal advantage. You want a tableau, Alara? I understand. 7:30 on the dot. Do not speak to him before I arrive, and I'm bringing my leather briefcase. Not a purse. The second call was to Officer Robert Flynn at the Providence precinct. He was the officer who had called me earlier, a man I knew casually from neighborhood watch meetings, a father of 3. Officer, my name is Alara Vance. I'm the owner of the Ford Focus that was totaled last night. I need to file a formal complaint against my grandson, Liam Vance, for grand theft and unauthorized use of a vehicle. But I have a request regarding the execution of the arrest. He listened to my quiet request, his initial confusion giving way to a tone of grudging respect. Mrs. Vance, sending 2 officers for a scheduled arrest at a private residence is highly irregular. We usually just send a car. I want to be the one to give him the opportunity to leave for school, I said, my voice steady, betraying no emotion. I want him to be prepared. I need 2 officers here at 7:45 a.m. I want a quiet presence. No sirens. No lights. I need him to see the law, not a circus. I need him to understand that this is consequence, not chaos. After a long, weighted pause, Officer Flynn's tone softened slightly. 7:45, Mrs. Vance. We'll be professional. This is a tough call, but I respect it. By 7:15 a.m., the dining room was a scene of calculated domesticity. The table was set with my best, rarely used wedding china, white with a pale gold rim. The steaming casserole, perfectly browned, was in the center. The aroma was suffocatingly sweet. I sat at the head of the table, dressed in a simple, charcoal gray wool suit that Arthur always loved, my spine rigid. The angry purple bruise on my left elbow was clearly visible against the light gray cuff. I had selected the outfit deliberately, not a victim, but a petitioner of justice. At 7:30 a.m., the doorbell rang, the first external sound of the morning. I opened the door to find Aunt B. She was indeed holding her large, expensive leather briefcase, a sign of her profession's uncompromising nature. Her expression was granite, her tailored black suit looking more like ceremonial armor than clothing. Good morning, Alara. We will speak only when necessary. Let's get this done, she said, her voice a low, gravelly purr of authority. We sat down, and I poured her coffee, the steaming liquid cutting through the tension. We didn't exchange small talk. We simply waited in the silence, listening to the grandfather clock in the hall tick off the final, agonizing minutes of Liam's false freedom. At 7:45 a.m., on the precise tick of the clock, the heavy tread of his footsteps sounded on the stairs. Liam was descending into the trap. Liam lumbered into the dining room, rubbing the sleep from his eyes. His hair was messy, his threadbare parka thrown carelessly over his shoulders. He stopped dead in the threshold. He was expecting the usual script, a sullen, silent grandmother waiting to launch into a predictable scold, followed by a tearful offer to call the insurance company. He was not expecting the tableau vivant of high consequence that greeted him. The table was a study in contradictions, a lavish breakfast of scalloped potatoes, golden brown and steaming, set on my delicate wedding china. And seated at the table, one on either side of the head, were me, in my courtroom gray, and Beatrice Sterling, the most ruthless lawyer in the state, staring at him over the rim of her coffee cup. The heavy leather briefcase, the briefcase of judgment, was planted like a pillar beside her chair. Liam's face was the first thing to truly crack. The smug exhaustion of the spoiled boy vanished in an instant. He recognized Aunt B. He had seen her on local news segments, a formidable pillar of the Providence establishment. Grandma, Aunt B, what's going on here? Is this some sort of intervention? He stammered, his eyes darting frantically between the china, the briefcase, and the arrangement of broken porcelain elephant pieces visible on the sideboard behind me. Good morning, Liam, I said, my voice flat, empty of warmth. Sit down. I made your favorite breakfast. He hesitantly pulled out the chair across from me and sat down, his hands nervously gripping the edges of the linen tablecloth. He didn't dare touch the food. The aroma of Gruyere and chives, once comforting, now hung in the air like a sickeningly sweet gas. Look, I'm sorry about the car, all right? I was stupid. It was the snow, I panicked. I'll pay for it. I promise. Can we just talk about this like a family? He began, launching into his practiced routine, a blend of false contrition and barely disguised panic. B, without taking her eyes off him, cut him off with a single, sharp, resonant word. No. She placed her coffee cup back on its saucer with a delicate clink that sounded like a shot being fired. Then, she reached down, unlatched the heavy brass clasp of the briefcase, and pulled out a thick stack of papers. She didn't put them on the table. She held them, letting the sheer, intimidating weight of the legal documents hang in the charged air between us. This is not a family discussion, Liam, B said, her voice low and colder than the February air outside. This is a legal intervention. Last night, you committed grand theft of a vehicle, an act compounded by the fact that you took that vehicle without a license. You were involved in an accident, rendering the vehicle a total loss. Your grandmother could have swallowed the cost, filed the claim, and pretended this was an unfortunate incident. But that would mean perpetuating a toxic, enabling pattern that has become a criminal liability. Liam was staring at the documents, his face turning a sickly, mottled gray. Theft! But I'm family. I'm her grandson. It's my grandma's car. Precisely, I interjected, looking him straight in the eye. I felt the powerful, clean surge of truth giving me strength. It was mine, Liam, and you stole it with malice. You shoved me aside, shattering my property and my independence, and you didn't look back to see if I was lying bleeding on the floor. I slowly raised my left arm, rotating it slightly so the bruise on my elbow was facing him, the deep, ugly purple blooming against the stark white of my skin, a stark contrast to the elegant gray wool of my suit. It was not just a bruise, it was the physical evidence of his contempt. He stared at the mark. The color drained completely from his face, leaving behind a terrifying, stark pallor. For the first time, I saw genuine fear replace arrogance. He saw not the inconvenience of his actions, but the damage he had inflicted upon the woman who loved him. I didn't mean to hurt you, Grandma. I swear. I was just frustrated. I was just trying to self-medicate, escape, entitled, be finished for him, her voice escalating slightly, the precision of a scalpel. Excuses are the language of weakness, Liam. This paperwork is the language of the law. You made a series of conscious, cruel choices that resulted in a felony charge, and this time, your grandmother is not going to stand in front of the judge to lie for you. She placed a single document on the table, a formal, signed complaint filed with the police department. The sight of my signature seemed to shock him more than the presence of Aunt B. And right then, at the precise moment of maximum tension, the front door chimes rang. It was a different sound than the doorbell, a gentle, official ding-dong that marked a scheduled, prearranged arrival. A sound that stripped away the last veneer of normal domesticity. Liam flinched violently, his eyes darting toward the hall. Two figures entered the dining room, moving with quiet, professional authority. Officer Robert Flynn and his partner, both imposing in their dark blue uniforms. They didn't speak. They simply stood at the entrance. Their presence, the polished leather of their belts, the quiet metal of their equipment, a silent, overwhelming force of consequence. Liam shot out of his chair, sending it scraping loudly across the hardwood floor. His face was a contorted mask of pure terror and betrayal. What is this? Is this a joke, Grandma? You set me up. You call the cops on me. You're turning me over to strangers. I kept my seat, reaching out only to calmly take a small spoon and serve myself a portion of the potatoes. I was not hungry, but the ritual was everything. It's not a joke, Liam, I said, looking down at my plate, letting the weight of my indifference crush him. It's justice. I was going to give you a ride to the community college this morning, like I have done faithfully for the last year. But since you stole my transportation and proved yourself a danger, to me and to the public, I arranged a new ride. Officer Flynn stepped forward, his expression grave, devoid of the neighborly warmth I knew. Liam Vance, we need you to come with us. Your grandmother has filed a formal complaint. You are being charged with grand theft of a vehicle, a felony. Liam's face cycled through disbelief, terror, and finally, a surge of blazing, self-pitying rage, the last desperate maneuver of a tyrant losing control. "You can't do this, Alara. We're family. I'm your daughter's son. You're choosing a totaled car over me? You're going to put me in a cage over a fender bender," he screamed, his voice cracking with hysteria, the raw noise of his entitled pain filling the house. I looked up from my plate, my appetite completely gone. The scalding anger in his voice felt pathetic, thin. "I didn't choose a car, Liam," I said, my voice low and steady, radiating a finality that silenced his noise instantly. "I chose me. I chose my safety. I chose my peace. And I chose to stop enabling the cruel, broken man you've become." I leaned forward, my knuckles resting on the crisp linen tablecloth. "You want to talk about family? Family is your father's memory, the inheritance of decency and loyalty. Family is not using your mother's tragic death as a lifelong excuse to terrorize the one person who risked her own peace for you. Family is not shoving a 72-year-old woman into a cabinet and destroying her only means of independence." My eyes narrowed. "I called the police because my love for you had become a toxic blanket, smothering my will to live. You need to hit rock bottom, Liam, so you can finally see the surface. This," I gestured to the uniforms and the briefcase, "is the bottom. This is the only chance you have to climb back up and become the kind, brilliant boy Cecilia loved." Bea chimed in, her voice as sharp as a newly honed dagger. "Your grandmother's actions are the single most courageous and loving thing she could do for you. There are boundaries set in concrete. The law is not a game, Liam. And your self-pity is not a defense against a felony." Officer Flynn stepped closer, placing a calm, firm hand on Liam's shoulder. "It's time to go, Liam. Do not resist." The realization hit Liam like a physical blow. The game was over. I wasn't backing down. Ampy wasn't leaving. The law was in my dining room, and my forgiveness was not on the table. He slumped, the fight draining out of him. He looked at me, tears streaming down his face, the raw, ugly tears of pure, absolute defeat. "You'll be alone, Grandma," he whispered, his last pathetic attempt to inflict fear. "You'll regret this. I was all you had left." "No," I replied, meeting his gaze unflinchingly. "I'm not alone. I have my house, I have my peace, and I have the strength that you forced me to find. The only thing I will ever regret is not doing this sooner." Officer Flynn gently but firmly took his arm. The second officer moved in seamlessly behind him. And then the final, definitive sound, the click of the handcuffs. It was loud, dry, and metallic. It was the sound of my prison door swinging open. Liam let out a gasping sob, a guttural sound of pure loss. He offered no resistance as Officer Flynn began the familiar, cold litany of his rights. They escorted him out quietly. I heard the muffled voices on the porch, the distinct sound of a police cruiser door closing, a heavy, final thud, and then the slow, deliberate fading of the engine noise as they drove away into the morning. Silence. The beautiful, empty, peaceful silence returned. I didn't move. Ampy gently rose from her chair, came around the table, and put a firm hand on my shoulder. "It's done, Alara," she murmured. "The hardest thing you will ever do, but the right thing. Now we go file the paperwork." I finally lowered my gaze to the plate of cold scalloped potatoes. I still couldn't eat, but for the first time in 3 years, the tension in my chest eased. I was free. I had chosen my own life. The immediate aftermath was surreal, a world washed clean of noise but thick with the smell of regret. Bea and I drove downtown, BEA's powerful SUV cutting efficiently through the slush. At the precinct, filing the report felt less like an act of vengeance and more like a medical procedure, cold, clinical, and necessary for survival. I signed the forms, my hand steady, certifying the felony charge. Bea drove me back home around noon. She didn't leave until she had called my daughter-in-law, Joanna, Arthur's sister's child, a nurse with a practical mind, and arranged for her to stay with me for a few days. Bea left me with a final, bracing instruction. Don't touch his room, don't look at the sideboard, and don't answer the phone. You are in quarantine. You are healing. But healing was not immediate. The silence was unnerving, cavernous. Every creak of the old house, every drip from the kitchen faucet, echoed in the emptiness Liam had left behind. For the first 2 nights, I slept in Arthur's old armchair downstairs, unable to bear the quiet of the upstairs bedrooms. The ghost of guilt was a heavy presence, whispering that I was a cruel, unnatural grandmother. The constant, low-level anxiety that had been my baseline for 3 years didn't just vanish. It transformed into sharp, paralyzing stabs of panic. Every sound was potentially his return. On Saturday morning, Joanna arrived. She was practical and compassionate, refusing to treat me like a victim. She simply cleaned, cooked, and maintained a comforting, steady silence. The first step in true repair wasn't internal, it was external. The cracked pane of glass in the storm door, the scar Liam left when he slammed the door, was a constant, ugly reminder of the night. Joanna called a local glass repair service. That afternoon, Mr. Samuel Chin arrived. He was a small, quiet man in his late 60s, a master craftsman with the precise hands of an artisan. He worked slowly, meticulously, removing the shattered pane. "Terrible break, Mrs. Vance," he murmured, not judging, just stating a fact. "Looks like a powerful slam. This type of single pane, they don't take much." As he worked, I watched his calm, measured movements, the way he cut the new glass, fitting it perfectly into the frame. I found myself telling him the story, not the whole story, but enough. I told him about the car, the total loss, the theft, and the arrest. I told him I did it for my peace. Mr. Chin paused his work, his small, careful hands holding the new glass. He looked at me, his eyes kind but serious. "Mrs. Vance," he said softly, "glass is strong, but it shatters when the tension is too high. You can repair glass, but you cannot repair the tension that caused the break. You remove the tension. That is wisdom. Your home is a temple, not a battleground. You did right." His words, simple and profound, were the first moment of true absolution I received. He wasn't a lawyer or family. He was a craftsman who understood integrity and breakage. He replaced the glass, sealed the frame, and when he left, the front door no longer felt like a symbol of trauma, but a symbol of protection. I felt the first small, cautious seed of control take root. But the ghost of guilt persisted. It required professional help. Joanna, using BEA's contact, secured me an appointment with Dr. Vera Dubois, a specialist in family trauma and complicated grief. My first session with Dr. Dubois was the following Tuesday. Her office was high up in a modern building downtown, a space flooded with soft, natural light, smelling faintly of clean linen and lavender. I sat in her soft, suede armchair, gripping my purse so tightly my knuckles ached. The shame was a physical lump in my throat, hot and hard. I don't know where to start, doctor," I whispered, my voice trembling. Dr. Dubois, a woman with warm, wise eyes and a quiet intensity, simply nodded. "You start where the pain is, Alara. We have an hour. We can sit in silence for 59 minutes, if that is what you need. But know this, you are safe here. You are not being judged." I couldn't speak for 10 minutes. I just sat there, looking at the pattern on the rug. But her patience, her silent, absolute refusal to push me, finally gave way to a dam break. I began to cry, not the pitiful, stifled sobs of the past, but huge, wrenching, desperate tears. And then I started to talk. I talked for a solid 45 minutes, detailing the entire, agonizing 3-year slow-motion car crash. The lost daughter, the inherited rage, the contempt, the escalating fear, the smashed elephant, the stolen keys, the bruise, the silent trap at the breakfast table. I talked about the terrible relief when the handcuffs clicked. "I feel like I betrayed my own blood," I choked out, wiping the tears away with a linen handkerchief. "I chose material safety over my daughter's son. I feel like the most unforgiving, cruel woman in Providence." Dr. Dubois leaned forward slightly, her gaze unwavering. "Alara, let's reframe that word. You did not choose material safety. You chose moral integrity. You chose to stop participating in a lie. You chose self-preservation over co-destruction. Your love for Liam became a weapon he used to hurt you. You did not betray him. You simply refused to be his accomplice any longer. That is the ultimate act of courageous love. Now we must work on forgiving the version of yourself who felt guilty for saving her own life." The session left me exhausted, but lighter. I had begun the long, arduous process of excavating my own survival. As I began my stumbling path to internal healing, Liam was starting his. And be ensured that, due to my formal complaint and my documented injury, the charges stuck. The court hearing, be explained, was swift and decisive. Liam's history of small-scale disturbances, the neighborhood complaints, the minor vandalism incidents I always quietly paid for, didn't help his case. The judge, seeing the combined gravity of grand theft, unauthorized use, and the obvious exploitation of an elderly guardian, didn't sentence him to a long prison term, but had assured me that wasn't the goal. Instead, he was ordered into a mandatory, rigorous inpatient therapeutic recovery program, specializing in anger and entitlement issues for a period of 6 months, followed by a lengthy probation. 6 months. It felt like an eternity, but it was a confined, productive eternity. It was during his 4th week in the county holding facility, awaiting transfer to the long-term program, that the letter arrived. It was a plain, white envelope from the county correctional facility. My name and address were written in his unmistakable, sprawling hand, the same hand that had gripped my keys and shoved me aside. My hands trembled violently as I took it from the mailbox. I carried it inside, not daring to open it in the open air. I sat in Arthur's old armchair, the afternoon sun streaming through the newly repaired storm door, warming my shoulders. I opened the envelope carefully. The paper was lined, the cheap kind from correctional facilities. The letter was short, but it felt impossibly heavy. Moments before they put the cuffs on me, I hated you. I hated that you were stronger than I was. I blamed you for the food, for the quiet, for the lack of excitement in my life. I was a pathetic coward. I don't really know how to start this. I guess I'm sorry isn't enough, and it shouldn't be. I've said and done unforgivable things, Grandma, especially that last night. I know that now. These past 4 weeks in here, cold, sober, with nothing but the echo of my own failure to distract me, they've been the longest and clearest of my life. I've had to look at the man I've become, and I didn't like what I saw. I saw a bitter, weak man who blamed everyone for his problems, the dead mother, the slow town, the old woman who loved him most. I don't remember everything from the night of the crash, but I remember enough. And the image of your face, the shock, the fear in your eyes when I shoved you into the hutch. I will never forget that. I hate myself for causing you that injury, that terror. When the police walked in, I thought you had betrayed me. But in here, in the quiet, I finally understood the truth. You didn't do that to me, you did that for me. You hit the emergency button because the plane of my life was going down, and I was too busy fighting with the flight attendant. You stopped me. You forced me to face the wreckage I created. I'm not asking for your forgiveness. I don't deserve it. I just wanted you to know that I understand. Thank you for having the courage I didn't have. Thank you for choosing to save your life, instead of continuing to lose it with mine. I have a very long way to go, but I'm looking at myself now. And it's because of you. Liam. I read the letter 3 times, 4 times, until the cheap paper was thin and worn. Tears ran down my face and dripped onto the ink, blurring the letters. But they weren't tears of sorrow or guilt. They were tears of hope, relief, and a kind of profound, agonizing validation. It was the first time in over 3 years that I had heard my grandson's real voice. Not the voice of the entitled tyrant, but the voice of the lost, terrified man who had been buried beneath the rage. He still had a long, terrible road ahead, but for the first time, I felt a spark, a tiny, flickering light at the end of the darkest tunnel I had ever walked. In the 6 months that followed, I focused entirely on rebuilding Alara. I continued my twice-weekly therapy with Dr. Dubois. I followed her instructions, reconnect with my community. I rejoined the local church knitting circle, and I started inviting friends over. Mrs. Petrie, the elderly woman who used to babysit Liam when he was a toddler, became a regular tea guest. Slowly, brick by therapeutic brick, my house started to feel like a home again, not a prison. The silence was no longer scary, it was peaceful. I took the insurance settlement for the Focus, which was, in the end, less than half what Arthur had paid, and used it to buy a used, small red Toyota Yaris. It wasn't the stately blue Ford, but it was mine, and it drove smoothly. It represented my new, unbreakable freedom. I also took a practical step that cemented my new boundaries. We had arranged for the permanent restraining order, ensuring that upon his release, Liam could not come within 500 feet of my residence. I even installed a modern security system with discrete cameras and window sensors. The small, quiet beep when I armed the system every night was the sound of my personal control. 6 months later, the phone rang. It was Mr. Wallace, a mediator from the rehabilitation center. Liam had successfully completed the inpatient program. He was sober, compliant, and working a simple, structured job, bagging groceries at a supermarket on the other side of Providence. He was living in a regulated sober living facility, and he was asking to see me. Not at home, not alone, in a mediated, neutral session with a therapist present. My heart jumped, a frantic ballet of fear, hope, and doubt. Was I ready? Did I want to see him? I looked around my living room, at the afternoon sun streaming through the new glass, at my healthy house plants, at the photographs of my smiling daughter Cecilia. I was at peace. The question echoed in my mind for days. Am I willing to risk this peace? I discussed it with Aunt B. "Ilara, the decision is yours," she said, her voice pragmatic. "But remember, seeing him doesn't mean forgetting. Listening doesn't mean letting him back in. You can go hear what he has to say, and keep your door and your heart locked just as firmly as before. This is an exercise in boundary maintenance." I talked to Dr. Dubois. She went deeper. "What are you afraid of, Ilara? Are you afraid of the man Liam is now, the thin, controlled man under the law's scrutiny? Or are you afraid of the grandmother inside you, the one who still desperately wants to forgive and forget everything and risk her life again for love?" Her question hit me right in the soul. That was it. I wasn't afraid of the Liam of now. I was afraid of my own almost infinite capacity for self-sacrifice, afraid of my stubborn, blind love for my daughter's son. It took me a full week to decide. In the end, the answer came not from my head, but from my deepest, most bruised heart. I had to go. Not for him, but for me. I needed to see with my own eyes if the change was real. I needed to close that traumatic chapter not by leaving the pages torn and scattered, but by putting a firm period at the end. A period that could, perhaps, be the start of a new sentence. The mediation session was set for a Tuesday afternoon at a community center near the rehab clinic, a neutral, safe space. I drove myself in my small, red Toyota Yaris, a silent testament to my independence. As I drove, I felt my stomach churn violently. I wore a simple, structured cotton dress, and I was gripping the steering wheel so tight my knuckles ached. I felt like I was driving to a funeral, the funeral of the toxic relationship we once had. The mediator, a kind man named Mr. Peters, met me at the door. He was quiet, reassuring. He led me to a small room with a round table and 3 chairs. There was a pitcher of water and some glasses. He informed me that Liam was already there, waiting in an adjacent room. I sat down, my back straight, my new purse, a structured, sensible leather one, in my lap. I waited. Every second was a torture. Then, the door opened. The man who walked in was not the entitled tyrant who had shoved me into a cabinet, and he wasn't the smiling boy from my pictures either. He was a stranger, a deeply unfamiliar man, stripped of his layers of arrogance and contempt. He was thin, so much thinner. The puffiness of entitlement was gone from his face, revealing the sharp, defined cheekbones he'd inherited from my daughter Cecilia. His hair was cut short, his posture disciplined. He wore a simple button-down shirt, meticulously ironed, and clean dark jeans. But the biggest, most seismic change was in his eyes. The red, bloodshot rage and resentment were gone. In their place was a clear, tired gaze, a look that had seen too much crying, a look that carried the profound, crushing weight of shame. He stopped dead in the doorway when he saw me. He didn't smile. He just looked at me, and I saw both panic and a raw, desperate hope warring in his face. Mr. Peters gently invited him to sit. Liam walked carefully to the chair across from me, keeping a precise, respectful distance. The mediator began by explaining the ground rules. Speak respectfully, no interruptions. Focus on feelings and progress. The goal was not reconciliation, but communication and the establishment of new boundaries. Then, Mr. Peters gave the floor to Liam. Liam folded his hands on the table. They were trembling slightly. He looked at his own hands, not at me, as he began to speak, his voice low, almost a whisper, the sound of a man relearning how to use his voice. "Grandma," he began, "I know I have no right to ask you for anything, not even to be here. But I asked for this meeting because I needed to say it to your face. I needed you to hear it from my mouth, not from a letter, not from a lawyer." He paused, taking a deep, shuddering breath, and then he looked up and met my eyes. "I am sorry. I am so profoundly sorry for the pain I caused you, for the fear, for the humiliation. I'm sorry for every angry word, every destroyed object, every night you spent worrying, hiding from me. And I am so sorry, Grandma, that I raise my hand to you. There is no excuse. There is no justification. It wasn't the stress. It wasn't the stagnation. It was me, a weak, bitter, and cruel me. And I will spend the rest of my life regretting that night." The tears were streaming down his face, silent, unchecked. He didn't wipe them away. They were tears of genuine, externalized pain. "In the program," he continued, his voice thick with emotion, "they make you look at the wreckage you left behind. And my wreckage was you, Grandma. I almost destroyed your home, your car, and your peace. And I know that I'm sorry doesn't fix anything, doesn't bring back the focus, doesn't heal the glass. But I needed you to know that I know what I did. I am not running from it anymore. I am facing the consequence." I listened in silence, my spine remaining perfectly straight. I looked for falseness, for manipulation, but I found none. What I saw was a man, finally sober and finally broken, staring at his own shards. Mr. Peters turned to me. "Mrs. Vance, is there anything you would like to say?" I looked at Liam, at my grandson, and I told him the truth that was born from my therapy. "I believe you, Liam," I said, my voice steady. "I believe that you are truly sorry, and I forgive you." A sob escaped him, a sound of such profound, agonizing relief that it broke the last remaining piece of my old heart. But I continued, and my voice, though soft, became firm, unwavering, the sound of a new boundary being erected. "But forgiving does not mean forgetting, and it does not mean going back to the way things were. That Alara, the grandmother who protected you from everything, who erased your mistakes, she doesn't exist anymore. You killed her that night when you chose to steal my freedom." I saw the raw pain in his face, but I had to say it. "I am your grandmother, and I will always love you, Liam. But now, I have to love myself more. Our relationship from today on will have boundaries. They will be strong, and they will be non-negotiable. You have your home, I have mine. You have your life, I have mine. We will not live together again. Ever." He nodded, not arguing. He was listening to the voice of consequence, not the voice of enablement. "We can see each other from time to time. For coffee, in a public place. But my house, Liam, and my peace, they are no longer open to your storm. You need to learn to be your own safe harbor. You need to earn back your own trust, not mine." It was hard. Every word was hard, costing me a piece of my breath. But it was the most honest, liberating thing I had ever said to him. A year passed, a year of baby steps and cautious maintenance. We stuck rigidly to the arrangement. Every 2 weeks, we met at a simple diner halfway between my quiet neighborhood and his sober living facility. We always sat in the same vinyl booth by the window. We always ordered the same thing: black coffee for him, tea with lemon for me, and a single slice of blueberry pie, Arthur's favorite, to share, a small tribute to the peace he once brought me. We talked about his progress, his consistent work at the community kitchen, his weekly meetings at the support group, his desire to finally get his license and enroll in classes. We talked about my garden, the weather in Providence, and the latest gossip from Aunt Bee, who was still acting as my legal sentinel. We didn't talk much about the past, but the unspoken knowledge of it was always there, a solid foundation beneath our cautious conversation. He hadn't had a single lapse. The relationship wasn't the same. The blind, unthinking intimacy of a grandmother and grandson, that was gone, perhaps forever. But in its place, something new and infinitely healthier had grown. A cautious respect, a love with boundaries. It was a quieter, perhaps sadder relationship, but it was safe. And for me, today, safety was the most precious commodity in the world. Today I sit on my porch, feeling the late afternoon breeze of early autumn. The air is cool, carrying the scent of wood smoke and damp earth. The house is quiet, but it's a good quiet. It's my quiet. I look at the driveway. where the large, dependable blue Ford Focus once sat, a car that represented my old life, my old grief, and my vulnerability, there is now my small, used red Toyota Yaris. It gleams in the low sun. It is a symbol of thrift, independence, and the courage to start small again. Liam is alive. He is sober. And at 20 years old, he is finally, painfully, becoming the man he should have been at 17. It took a terrible act, an immense pain, and a complete shattering of our world for it to happen. A grandmother's love, I learned, sometimes has to be cruel to be kind. They lost everything they tried to steal from me. My peace, my dignity, my home. Liam, in the end, lost his freedom for a time, but in the process, he found a chance to be free from himself, free from the rage that was killing him. I learned that true love isn't about enduring everything in silence. True love is having the courage to draw a line in the sand and say, I love you, but I love myself more. And you may not cross this line. And sometimes the family you choose to stand with you, like a fiercely protective lawyer, a kind glass repairman, and a dedicated therapist, is stronger than the family of blood that tries to tear you down. My life is built now not on forgiveness, but on boundaries. And that, I realize, is what true peace looks like.